Happy New Year. This is Ed in San Diego. As you can see, that's a beautiful skyline at the Embarcadero. And that ship there is all lit up. And that's the Star of India. It's about 100 years old. God knows what it was in the early days, but there it is as a tourist attraction. Part of the Maritime Museum, of which I'm a member, by the way. And with us is Christian Ter-Nedden and
Hello.
daughter Natalie Ter-Nedden, and they
Hello.
both plus wife and other daughter were in Paris recently for an
That's
extended
right.
trip. And welcome back. You just got back,
Thank
I
you.
think, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, day before yesterday.
So you're still on jet lag?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, but it's a good jet lag. Yeah. Okay, so tell us very briefly, if you don't mind, in 60 seconds, about your personal visualizations walking into the now beautiful, very beautiful church, Notre Dame.
Oh, yes. I sent Ed a picture from Notre Dame while I was in Notre Dame.
Yes.
So I remember it being very, very dark.
Yeah, dark and gloomy and even a
Dark and
little
gloomy,
messy.
messy, not very well cared for. And now you walk in and it's just very bright. It's this light, almost like a light beige, like sand color. And the paintings just pop, of course, because it's not just all this big, gray. Um, uh, and it's a little bit more cleaned up. And of course, there's a gazillion people. We had to make reservations to even get in because it just opened on December 8th, I believe, and we were there uh like when we were there, like January 1st or 2nd or something like that.
Yeah,
So
it's just
there were
great.
a boatload of people that wanted to go there.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks very much for showing up today.
Sure.
And so Ron Cooper is in the DC area, and he retired Air Force officer, jet fighter pilot, and now he and Marty have uh, just a buffo practice in training. Tell us more about that, Ron.
Ed, thank you. One of the things Marty and I do is work with businesses, and we'll work with any business, but we work primarily with the small to medium-sized businesses. And in the context of training, we, in a very simple term, help people get along well with each other. There are some places who would say, yep, we just have superficial conversations at the water fountain, coffee bar, and so forth. And I'm just putting in time here. But what we help the owners and the leaders do within a company is help develop what we call a culture of harmony. And that harmony means, in the context of people, processes, we pledge, we purpose, to add another P word, we purpose to work with each other, and we purpose to have processes such that whatever we encounter, we will work through it together. And encounter meaning, you may have a difference of opinion of the way we can operate, we can get better, but the culture is such that I welcome diversity of thought. And we will, as a leader, we will fairly evaluate every suggestion you have. And I'm certainly hoping you come to me with a thoroughly thought through suggestion, but I will fairly evaluate it with you. But that's the type of culture and the teachings that we do, Ed.
Thank you. And I want to encourage everybody to use the chat to exchange contact information. That will certainly add to the ROI you take from this event. Mika, you are a pioneer. You were a pioneer and you still are. But it was breakthrough of work from home within the government, flex. And now you're still doing the same thing, but on a much larger scale. Why don't you tell us about
I've seen it all. Yeah, so it's interesting. I started my career in uniform. And so Ron, again, thank you for your service as well, although go Army. I was enlisted as well as a commissioned officer. And after 9/11, I was stationed in the Washington, D.C. National Headquarters region, helping the United States intelligence community with a lot of human capital and military personnel policies and programs. And some of that included reintegration, mass deployment of IC personnel that had never been deployed en masse before, until, that tragedy, the issues that were going on. It required coordinating with military services and civilian agencies across the intelligence community, and also international governments, to get people to sign up for billets and resources and people, and also make sure that they were okay when they were going downrange, again, in this mass deployment effort that we were supporting. Some of that required new policies, new protocol, and also how we were thinking about reintegrating workers when they would come back from overseas and their families. And that required a different approach in terms of how we fostered collaboration, supportive policies and programs and practices, and also changing managerial mindsets when it comes to change management, culture, and training. So a lot of what Ron was talking about as well. In fact, you see my tagline in my own veteran-owned small business that I now am operating full-time, Strategy at Work. Our tagline is people, performance, and progress. And so I worked all across government, from areas like the executive department, the executive branch, the small agencies in the FIREA, which are your financial industry regulatory agencies, all the way to the Department of Labor, before jumping over into private industry first, where I worked as the vice president of employer engagement for a remote first company called Flex Jobs, where we also worked with employers of all sizes, types, industries, and occupations, helping them to leverage flexible work policies for the purposes of attracting, retaining, and hiring top talent, until such time as the global pandemic happened, when everybody needed a remote and hybrid work expert and people needed, help with their flexible work policies, their change management practices, their leadership development, workforce development, and how they would strengthen working together when people were not co-located at the same time at the same place, whether that be all remote or all physically co-located. And so I took a bet on myself, Ed, and started working for myself along with some amazing strategic partners over the last few years, and here we are. So I have the great delight and honor to help also employers of any industry and occupation think differently about their talent strategies, their employer branding, marketing policies, and culture change practices.
So what is the website? Is it strategyatwork.com?
It's actually strategyatwork.us, like us, or US like USA. So strategyatwork.us.
Got it.
And I also have one, it's in development just for myself, which is info@Mika Cross. That's more of my keynoting and speaking and presentations. But really, we are here to make the world of work better. We love working with partners and organizations that also have different levels of expertise, whether it be mental health and well-being, whether it be flexible work, whether it be thinking about digital detox and technology, and how we can really brace for change and success in the future of work for all employers.
So I'm originally from Boston, so I'm very familiar with, not as familiar as you. What part of Maine did you grow up in?
Well, we have one claim to fame in my hometown, which is Stephen King. So if you are a horror book or movie fan, I'm sure many of you know who Stephen King is. But yeah, I'm from Bangor, which is central Maine. And much of my family, though, was in southern Maine and spread out across the state. I left when I decided to enlist in the United States Army, but I did do a year and a half of college before I joined at Northeastern University, also in Boston. So
Yeah.
I am familiar, more so with the college scene in Boston back in the day. And,
Yeah,
I
right.
enlisted, I worked for the International Military Student Office. That was my first job as an enlisted soldier in Tradoc at Fort Knox, Kentucky, where I was stationed with the boys. This is the 16th Cavalry Unit, the tankers. And we worked with international governments, helping to bring their families and their officers over to the United States to train alongside our US forces. And it was there that my company commander had invited me to think about broadening my scope and my leadership development. And I threw my hat in the ring for a scholarship that allowed me to leave my military service early and become a commissioned officer, which I did for 4 years after that.
Oh, that's a great story. Wow. Natalie, tell me and tell the audience what you and your sister like the most about being in Paris?
That's okay. First of all, um, I wanted to say that one of my close friends is from Maine, and sorry, I, I'm thinking about maybe sometime after college moving to Maine because I think Maine is beautiful. So I love Maine. Maine is great. Um, but when discussing Paris, I think my favorite part was um either the Musée Carnavalet, which is the museum dedicated to the history of Paris, which it's a pretty like thorough museum. It goes through a lot of it goes all the way from like early humans and like, you know, like stone tools, things like that. It goes all the way from that to like the 70s and 80s. So it's a very, very interesting museum. There's a lot there. My sister we joked that she got stuck in the Middle Ages because she kept looking at like the Middle Age artwork and things like that while we were trying to move on. So I would say that's probably my favorite museum. I also really like the Grand Palais. I think it's really beautiful architecture wise. Um, I'm
Where is
not,
that?
that is near the Hôtel Invalides. I don't know what arrondissement it's in, but I know things in relation to where they are to other things. For context, I studied abroad in Paris for 3 months. So I'm pretty familiar with where things are in terms of like other monuments, but not 100% familiar with um like where things are geographically
So,
necessarily.
so the Hotel Invalides is down the big park near Montparnasse, and there's a straight shot of Eiffel Tower from there.
Um,
Depends on how you're turning, but yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, right. I don't know
Yeah.
which you go left or right,
Yeah.
but it's big. You can see
Yeah.
it. Yeah, this is great. Well, this is just a great story. So, why don't you just announce for yourself and to the audience here that is going to be viewing this in subsequent days, weeks, and months, and maybe longer, as I distribute it across our network. The audience viewership will be massive going forward. So why don't you explain who you are and what you're doing with your life these days? You're a sophomore or junior.
Yes. So I
Yes.
am currently a sophomore at college, and I am majoring in anthropology, specifically cultural anthropology. I have done for I think five 5 years, something like that, 5 or 6 years. I've done volunteering with historical houses in my area, and I volunteered with my city's historical committee at City Hall. I volunteer there as the secretary. Um, and I I've run some clubs uh at my college, but also in high school. I ran some different clubs. Currently I'm president of the anthropology club at my school. And
You're
yeah,
transitioning.
yeah, I'm currently in community college, but I'm going to be transitioning to a four-year university next fall.
Interesting. That's interesting. So, Christian, how do you like Paris this time?
It's amazing. It's overwhelming. Um, we had some really interesting experiences that I'm very grateful for. One of them was to take a guided 2-hour tour in a Citroën deux chevaux in a small French car from 1983 and puttering around Paris with it. I didn't have to drive it, thank God, because the stick shift is really weird. It's like a clothes hanger and you kind of shift like this. But my mom had one back in the 80s, and one of my brothers came from Switzerland and to celebrate Christmas with us, and my Christmas gift to him was to take this tour with him. So we sat, grown men in our 50s, sat in the back like we'd done when we were little boys in the 80s, in the same dinky little car. So that was definitely great. But just seeing Paris through the eyes of my children is, I used to go to Paris quite a bit back when I lived in Switzerland. Now seeing it through the eyes of my children is a treat, definitely a treat. And I came back with a lot of new impressions and ideas about mobility. And Mika, picked up on that you're in mobility as well, just from a completely different angle than I am. The idea of if you move to a city like Paris, how overwhelming it can be, particularly if you've never been, and how much there is to discover. Not just museums, even though we did a lot of those, but just the different parts of the city, which are can be very, very different indeed.
It's fascinating. So in 1999, I produced a live event in Paris, in the Montparnasse circle, and in the Hotel Meridian, which at that time was a 5-star hotel. I don't know whether it still is, but it was a buffo meeting, just great. The second time I'm using that word, but it was like a couple of hundred people showed up. And Philip Berry from Colgate-Palmolive at the time, he was in charge of 60 countries in global HR, um, based in Paris, and he was my keynoter. And so we partied like it was 1999. We had a live band in the conference area. That after the conference, we broke out the wine. Actually, it was sponsored by a winery, uh, and they brought cheese, and we had this live jazz band. And boy, it was just a great, great event. So that was not the first time I was in Paris, but certainly the most impressive thing that I've ever done in Paris. And someday we'll do it again, but not as big because I don't care about big things anymore. Here we are in the global meeting room, and this is 12 inches by 10. So, Mika, your life has been just full of success, from my vantage point, meaning business success and personal enjoyment from all of that, of seeing your ideas and what you have been dealing with because of your family and working. You want flexibility. And you said, well, why doesn't the government allow this? What is the big deal? And you were working and living in a minefield of people taking pot shots at you because of breaking the mold or trying to, and yet it has basically worked. So congratulations. And you are talking today and going forward through the video redistribution, coming global free access 24/7. Talk to the women and men out there who will be watching this in the coming months, who are younger. And this is all about generations. And I'm really happy to have Natalie again on the program. This is like your fourth time, I think,
Fifth.
fourth or fifth. Yeah, fifth time. Thank you for keeping track. And and
I
number
gotta know what my
55 for you.
daughter's up to,
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah. And so this is your 55th time on the show, or
Something like that, yeah.
right. Okay. And so and it's my 983. So we've been around a while. And but just today, earlier today, I'm not going to bore you with all my stuff here, but I know you can't see this well, but you can't see it at all. I'm holding up my written notes from earlier this morning. I was doing research on how to restructure my enterprise for the new year and grow. So I was taking all these notes, and I mention that now because of what you have done in developing the plan and the motif and structure of flex work, and proving that it could be productive. Would you like to share that insight?
Yeah, so I think you asked me for two perspectives, so I'll try to weave them together succinctly too. I will say, part of my passion starting out when I was in my 20s, working on these kinds of policies and projects was self-serving, kind of selfish. I looked at the workplace and I had to make really hard decisions when it came to my career. Think about it. I was in uniform. I served twice. I've seen both sides, both as a good follower and as a good leader. I worked at high levels, and because of 9/11, I was working at echelons higher than my rank normally would put me in positions for. And I was very quickly able to sort of read the culture of Washington, D.C., the government workplace, the combined, we call it a purple organization, where you have military branches of all services, as well as contractors and civilians. And it was such a great breeding place for me to learn and grow. But at the same time, I was just starting my family. I was starting to navigate a terrible divorce in my late 20s. I was finishing my graduate degree. I had a new baby and I was trying to figure out, how in the world do I juggle a successful career in Washington, D.C., whether in uniform or not, advance my own career goals as a working woman, as a working person in America, and follow my path. And I was trained in human resources and human capital. So I was an adjutant general in the military. And it interested me. I had finished my graduate degree. I had led, more than 50 people by the time I was 25 and managed millions of dollars of inventory and resources and was doing all these things. I had a top secret clearance and still looking to the left and the right of me and trying to figure out, like, how do I see myself in this world of work, in this model of work? So in the early stages, I decided to resign my commission after pinning on captain. And I went to work for Uncle Sam out of uniform as a civilian. And that's where I got trained in the Civilian Federal Resources, CFR, Code of Federal Resources, Code of Federal Regulations, I'm sorry, I misspoke, 5 CFR in civilian human capital and civilian HR in some of the very technical components of human resources management across the government. So I did things like employee management relations, where I learned very quickly that was not my cup of tea, because you had to be a management representative, not a person that advocated for people in the workforce necessarily. I did human capital policy. I ran the drug demand reduction program. I raised my hand when anybody needed extra people to work on things. And I was participating in the post 9/11 commission report implementation structures and opportunities through the intelligence agency that I was working at, to test things out and build collaborative cultures in different ways to break down stovepipes. So I was in HR, but I was also learning people and culture at the same time, and then navigating my own work-life path of this mother trying to parent, navigating a divorce, figuring out what single parenthood was going to look like in an area where I had no family or support to help me in my 20s. And so part of it was self-serving, Ed. So I raised my hand when they needed help restructuring policy. I wanted to write it. And I realized very quickly the power of the pen when it comes to change management practices. And so I would change words from, managers will not approve more than 2 days of flexi work. At the time we called it. I said management can, or managers will, accept or approve certain things in a different way. And even just restructuring the wording and writing things in plain language really helped to change mindsets and help managers understand and empower them that they had the ability to bend but not break the rules when it comes to policy. And then from there, I wanted to learn, Title VII, which is equal opportunity and diversity. I worked in work, life, and wellness, and then I traipsed my way across the rest of government, bringing those best and promising practices with me when it came to transformational workplace practices. So I sort of viewed my life as a test bed, like single parenting and going through challenges with my kids and trying to navigate my own career. while I was building the technical aptitude of what it looks like to do it for organizations that are like hundreds of thousands of people deep. And, you know,
And what that shows is that you are not alone with those
Yes.
challenges. And
Yes.
some of those who are going through the same thing also work in the government, not just in private sector.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a
If there's one thing
no-brainer.
you asked me one thing to say, like to other women or other workers that are trying to navigate this. And I will just say, I think the most powerful thing is to not measure your definition of success and self-worth off of the definition of someone else's, because I had to recalibrate a lot and stay true to my North Star, which was to be able to parent those kids the way that I wanted to be able to parent them, as well as navigate a career for myself. And so if you interject the word successful career, what that looks like for me may be a different definition than someone else. And I said no to jobs that I just didn't fit my life more than I was able to say yes to. And I'm talking about jobs at the White House and jobs where I would have gotten promoted to skip a grade and go from GS 13 to GS 15. And I had to say no to jobs that otherwise I would have wanted to say yes. And I might have boohoo cried in a pillow once or twice, the last 2 decades, but that's okay. And my kids are thriving. So staying true to what I believe in for myself, the kind of life I want for myself, but also what I believe my passion and purpose is, which is to create better workplaces for others.
Just so that I understand a little bit better, Mika, so how often did you have to go to the office, as it were, and how were you able to change that to fit the lifestyle that you just described, and the North Star you just described?
Well, it often depended on the different agencies. So I've worked in 7 different agencies, as well as in private industry, and then now for myself. So it looks different in every agency because agencies differ and they have the ability to change their policy based on the prescriptive government code that applies to the whole entire federal government. So I would look for organizations and supervisors and teams that had more flexibility and the kind of work that I would want to do. And so that was really hard and challenging to do. But, you know, at the first agency that I worked at out of uniform, I was also writing the policies for it. So that helped. The other thing is I had a really good professional reputation. And so if you're a high performer and people can count on you, they know you're judicious with government time, government resources, you're doing the right thing, you're delivering results. I had leaders, and at the time, they were boomers, and I wasn't, but these are older, more seasoned workers who were able to extend trust first, but hold accountable for results. And it worked fine. And so when I had my second child, I actually negotiated, rather than taking 3 full months of maternity leave, which, by the way, back then we didn't have paid maternity leave the way we do now. And I was able to extend 4 months by coming back to work early, by working on classified policy writing part-time from my home office, even while working in the intelligence community. But it required a creative application to how those flexible workplace programs were going to be implemented. So I was sort of like the guinea pig, and I demonstrated that it would work well. But I also had access to, senior intelligence analysts, Farsi speakers, technical experts in the nursing mother's room who I would meet because I was also a nursing mother and navigating a career in those, nursing mom rooms, and hear from them that like they had postponed starting their family until later in life. So these were older moms because they wanted to focus on their career first. Maybe they were even in HUMINT, which is collections in the intelligence community. But we had the policies and their supervisors weren't allowing them to participate in them. So they were attriting and leaving and going to work for Beltway bandit contractors in droves. And even to this day, I just went back last year and did a keynote for the Defense Intelligence Agency. It was like going home 20 years later. And they are still suffering with the same challenges of representation of women and other talent demographics in senior level positions. We can recruit them. We can recruit Gen Z, but they're leaving within 1 to 3 years, especially in core mission critical occupations. And so when we are trying to diversify our talent and we're looking at succession planning, when you have 70% of executive leaders in government that are eligible for retirement in the next 5 years, we are missing the mark. But It's
Yeah.
been 20 years and there's still no real big changes when it comes to organizations like that. And you asked me about the other, how did I find jobs like that? People would seek me out, and if they wanted me to come work, that was a negotiating factor more so than money.
Mhm.
Rather than a grade or a position title, I would negotiate flexibility.
Mhm.
Ron
Nice.
Cooper, you're hearing all this. This is this looks like a golden opportunity for somebody like you.
Oh my goodness. I have several hours of thoughts that come to mind. I'll try to condense into 2 or 3 minutes. First and foremost, Micah, congratulations. I want to tell you, and I hope I can come across as not patronizing you. I see determination in you, and that is such an admirable quality. Transformational workplace practices. I just so resonate with that term. As you can tell by looking at me, I have more life experience than you do. And I only mean that I was born before you, nothing more than that. But Mika, you have what I foresee now is the tenacity that you will overcome. I can believe you were maybe in a male dominated environment at some point in your life, and you're going through various life challenges. In the context of transformational workplace processes, I would hope leaders would uh, leverage what you were saying and say, Mika, you have everything we want. I just recognize you're going through various challenges and work with you in a very genuine way. And I'm going to say up front that some men can come across in a way to take advantage of females in even in the workplace, hit on the females. But Mika, I do believe that when you're with genuine leaders, you will know, and I will know, when we see talent and we want to nurture that talent, but help you through whatever life challenges you may be experiencing at the time. And I can promise those who are listening, when you have that type culture in a company, you will retain people. And you do whatever you need to do. But Mika, congratulations. I just radically admire the tenacity that I see in you now. Maybe you had to work through some various life challenges to get to that point, but I see it now.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And now, they hire me to tell them what to do. So there you go. No.
Great.
Okay, Natalie, this is a prime example. It's just wonderful to have the two of you on the show here because the stage is yours, Natalie. What do you want to talk about? What do you want to ask Mika?
Uh, um, I'm not sure necessarily if I have like a question, but I do think that kind of like going off of what you were saying, I do think it's really important for these companies that have, they've worked a certain way and managers have been really strict and, um, there hasn't been a whole lot of leeway for the people working in the company to be able to have a life outside of it. I think those companies need to change because with the new coming generation, like you said, if the new up and coming generation is hired into these spots and they realize that the conditions are still not ideal, then they're going to leave. Especially with, after COVID, with so many jobs now being online, if a company is not going to give Gen Z um like a work-life balance, then they will find it elsewhere. Somewhere else will probably have a better balance. So I think it's important for companies to listen to new voices and to start to make changes to policies that they've had set in place for like 30 years.
Yeah,
Natalie,
absolutely.
I'm very interested in what you just said, work-life balance. How do you define that? Because I have a perspective that work and life are never in balance. You're always trying to, to reach some kind of equilibrium. But how would you define work-life balance?
Well, I think it first off, I think it depends on the person, but I think work-life balance is something akin to when you have a job and you are working, but you also are able to have your own time. where it's not like, okay, every single day you need to work from sun up to sundown, but instead there's, there's time for workers to go home, spend time with their families, maybe work on a hobby that they have. And also that there are boundaries. Maybe workers say, okay, after 6, I don't work until the next morning. And there's not some sort of weird negotiation where the manager is saying, no, you have to work, even if it's 8 o'clock at night, you need to be working right now, when it clearly says in their contract that they work until 6. So it's something along those lines.
It's also something that we saw again in Europe, coming back from Paris, where this idea of what Natalie was just saying, that your time off work is your time off work, and there's not an intrusion like this. And there are in fact now countries that make that illegal, where this is a much more accepted and lived concept. That's how people live, and after a certain time, they're off duty, and nobody can expect them to just be there. So it was interesting to see that again, going back to Europe. You see it in the advertising. You see it when shops are just closed at a time when you would think that in America they'd be open. And you start wondering, why would that be, right? Wouldn't they make more money if they were open? And you start thinking about all this. And of course, traveling with younger people, they experience that, and they start seeing a different way of looking at this. And I love what Ron said. It is always an imbalance, and maybe trying to get work-life balance is an attempt, as futile as it may seem, to restore some order in that chaos, to set your own priorities. I love what Mika said about the North Star. I think that's a great image. What are your priorities in life? And then everything else should really fall into place. Where you work, what your work culture is, what you're expected to do. And I think that's what Natalie's talking about as well. You want to look for an employer that respects your boundaries, among many other things.
Well said, Christian. And Natalie, I'm going to try to balance what you were saying, your thoughts, with what your dad is saying as well. That let's just say we're putting together a very large proposal, and I, as the CEO or whatever position of the company, I can envision 40 more hours of work being needed to put into this proposal to bring it into closure. But in knowing you, Natalie, I want to certainly think about you, your home life, and so forth, Mika, as well, any of our employers, but our employees. But I want to respect your time, and I want to try to put in extra time with those who need to or who can, while making certain you have time for your home life. So I, as a leader, I want to do everything I can to meet your demands as I know you at home. But I think that requires us knowing each one of our employees and what it is that may constitute a work-life balance, meaning you've got family responsibilities. And I certainly want to respect that. So it's all a part of a culture, as Mika was saying. It's when you've got the culture is knowing your people. And certainly as a leader, we want to respect the people, because if we don't, or we give any indication we're not, because we're expecting more of you than what we know you responsibility you have at home, yeah, you're going to leave when you're not with you'll get short-term obedience only.
Mm-hmm.
I think, in the knowledge economy, and especially after the global pandemic, people have changed their relationship with work, and their values are changing. And you're seeing this in shifts when you're looking at workforce trends like the Great Resignation, quiet quitting. Now we have, the great, what is it called? Gartner, I think, just came out with it, or maybe it was Gallup. Basically, it's the Great Detachment, where people aren't quitting. They're coming to work for you, and they are disengaged and could care less about your bottom line, employers. And so this shift in terms of values and the model of work really needs to take place. So for me, I'm a huge advocate of rethinking everything when it comes to work, not just location of work, but also when work gets done, what kind of positions can be done in which fashion, and that flexibility isn't a one size fits all approach. And that takes a lot of strategic thinking. It also creates an opportunity for strengthening skills and competencies when you're talking about leading multi-generational, hyper, uber flexible teams that aren't co-located and working together at the same time, same place. But Ron, you know that from distributed teams in the military. And we've been doing that for decades and decades. But we also in the military invest in structured leadership development programs, not just training, not just individual learner, online training or in-person training, but actually developing our leaders through experiences, through programs, through structured approaches to how we turn out leaders in the military. And I really believe that we have fallen off a cliff when it comes to investing in the right skills for the modern workplace and leaders of people in this new work environment. So yeah, I was working with an employer, Ed, too. They were in the construction industry and they were like, that's all nice. Flexibility is great. We understand we're not going to get the best talent, but we can't offer work from home. Of course you can't. You're in construction, boots on the ground, you need to be in person and building these kinds of infrastructures. But how many women are you hiring? What about, formerly incarcerated folks that often are veterans that might have just a misdemeanor, like a bar fight, but need to be able to come back to work? And then thinking about, could you offer work shifts or different kinds of work flexibility when it comes to schedule to be able to accommodate different talent demographics? If you think about it, for women in this country especially, we've been working out of the home for over a century, but we have been overrepresented in support roles, low care healthcare, education, nursing, retail, hospitality industries, because they offer flexibility. They offer 3 12-hour workdays versus underrepresented in leadership and executive positions in every industry and occupation. So we have to change. If we can't change the mindsets, we can't change the policies, we can't change the structure, and people can't fit in. And Gen Z and the other generations are now saying, I am going to vote with my feet and go work for another employer who gets it. So to Natalie's point, it's not necessarily about balance. That's the term that we're talking about. But really, it's about this ebb and flow of being able to choose and have autonomy over when, where, and how we bring our best work and deliver results for the people that we're making money for, our employers.
It also depends on what kind of role you have, right? If you use that construction company as an example, does their accountant have to be on the site? Does whoever handles their HR needs, do they have to be on the construction site? If so, why? So one of the things that strike me about this whole discussion of working from home, the pros and the cons, and to me, it's there's pros and cons on both sides. But one of the ways to look at this is to say, if we all work from the office, why do we do that? What is the benefit? I have nothing against coming to the office every day if I see a benefit in it. And I've managed a team remotely for the last few years where, they were between Connecticut and San Diego. There was no office anymore. And that's what it was. There was no choice, so to speak. But because of that experience, I started thinking, who needs to be in the office and why is that? And unless there's a really good reason for it, I don't think that it's smart.
Well, or when too,
and when, yes, yes.
A lot of the tech companies right now are getting all wrapped around the axle around this concept of coffee badging. So they're saying, we want people in the office 3 or 4 days a week. And now they care if I'm just swiping in, grabbing a coffee, doing a meeting and leaving. I have been coffee badging my entire career. In the US intelligence community, I showed up in a SCIF, which is your secure compartmentalized facility, because I had to have access to the top secret computer, even though I didn't work on top secret materials. A lot of that is overclassified, by the way. But every day I was able to take a portion of my unclassified work home, either in the morning or at the tail end of my workday. And I had a mother's helper that came, a babysitter that helped. So I wasn't doing double duty, meaning mom duty and work, but I was able to do that. And I was in the building every day. I was just there from 10 to 3. And if my employer needed me to stay longer because we had a mission or a reason why I needed to stay longer, I made accommodations, and you better bet I would be there for the mission because they were flexible with my needs. I could be flexible with what they need on any given day. And when I went to we were talking about the kinds of flexibilities in other organizations, that changed as my children grew, as I got older. Sometimes we are dealing with people that are in the sandwich generation. They're actively parenting and they're taking care of other family members. And some of them are even taking care of grandkids on top of it. And so the dynamics of workers' needs are changing, and so does the need to structure different kinds of flexibility. What works for my job may not be the same that works for you, but having a choice around the kinds of flexibility that does fit my job is where the satisfaction lies, as long as we're measuring outcomes and monitoring results and impact rather than hours, time. And that's the one precious resource you can't put a monetary value on.
I want to change the topic a little bit. We have about 10 minutes remaining because of a hard close. So earlier, Mika, and Ron, you were talking about, I forget the words you used, in the military, training and development of people into leaders and closely adjudicating that, making sure that it works right because there's so much at stake. Would you call that doing that coaching in today's vernacular of HR stuff, bringing coaching back into every position to make sure that people are developed, taking care to develop people? Is that what was done in the military, Mika?
I think it was a little bit of everything. You have traditional technical training. So your technical training is with skills, the hard skills that you need, the bona fide job qualifications that you need to demonstrate in order to perform a job well. And that job might change throughout your career. Versus leadership and management development is how you lead people, how you motivate people, how you coach people, how you deliver feedback, how you exhibit empathy, how you create these work environments where people want to give their best. And in the military's case, sign a blank check for their lives on the line to defend this country. It's life or death in that instance. So in this environment, I learned everything, right, from my experiences personally, and I'm bringing them into my practice. So for what I'm seeing a need for, to your point, Ed, it's a combination. First of all, people have had enough of alone time. People are feeling very isolated and loneliness anyway. And so as much as you can do together time and have conversations of cohorts in respect to training and coaching together, that combined approach, I think, is the sweet spot for employers to invest in when they're talking about developing skills in management and leadership. I'm seeing that a very favorable outcome rather than your old school traditional training or online individual learning opportunities.
Ron?
And I'll add to that, it's very well said, Mika. In the military, we have professional military education, PME. It's an acronym that's thrown around always. And frequently that's an instructor that's teaching something. But in the context of your question, Ed, it's a matter of, I call it mentoring more so than coaching. You are helping bring on those behind you, the Mikas, the Natalies of the world, that I will be leaving the workforce, transitioning to something else, and Mika and Natalie will be staying in the workforce. I'm training them. And I will, if they are receptive to my training and I am an effective, worthwhile, trustful mentor, I'm going to train them to take over my position or something of that nature. They may not want to, but let's just say I'm going to try to train them to take over my position, because obviously I'm not going to be with this company until I take the last breath. And so Natalie, I'm sure, well, both Mika and Natalie would say that I do things a little bit different than they do. And yeah, they were raised on cell phones. I was not. And so those are the kind of things we need to be willing to adapt to and be very accepting of those who are raised in a much different technological environment in which we were.
Christian?
I think Ron is not only right, it's a smart perspective. Mika, you brought up the 70% of people who are just not going to be there, and this is what succession planning is all about, isn't it? It's to find the right leaders of the future, to give them access to the tools that they need, to the training that they need, and also to ensure that these people themselves can then train the generation after. We've talked on other shows with Ed. We've talked a little bit about the generation after Natalie's, Generation Alpha, and now there's even talk about Generation Zeta, the first people that are having kids already, coming up, and what is that going to be like in the workforce 20 years from now, 15 years from now? So I think that it's smart to just keep your perspective on the future and make sure that in every organization there is a pipeline of people who are ready, willing, and able to take over.
Ron, let me ask you a question, business question. To whom, in your view, Ron, considering what we were just talking about, who should I send this program to in direct sense, not just to big groups, but pinpoint distribution, laser focus?
If I could make an input on that, Ed, I would say emerging leaders. I use the term frequently. Those people who are leaning forward mentally, those who are aggressive, assertive. I think we have those people on the call right now, but I'm always looking for those people who are the assertive. And again, use the term, they're leaning forward, and I can stimulate their thinking through conversation. That I'll put an idea on the table, and I know that Natalie and Mika will improve on that idea, and that's what I'm hoping for. But they are good thinking people. Those are the ones I'm looking for, because I know the great ideas, the innovative ideas will come from them, although it may take several failings, shortcomings, if you want to use that term, to get to the ideal solution. But hey, we're always moving forward. Those are the people I want to work with.
Thank you. I wrote that down. Leaning forward.
Yes.
Thank you for being on the program, all of you. It's
Thank you.
been a mastermind.
Nice meeting you, Mike.
I had no
Oh, nice
idea
to
we're
meet y'all.
going to be so good together, but I'm really happy. Please come back.
We
Mika,
will,
great to
Ed.
see you.
Great to
Thanks.
see you, Ed. Great to see you,
Yeah.
everyone. Happy New
I
Year.
know.
Happy
Wonderful.
New Year.
Happy New Year.
Okay, ciao.
Oh,
Bye,
and
Mika.
Natalie, come to Maine. Let me know when you're there. We'll go have lobster.
Yay!
Yeah, lobster.
Lobster.
Okay, ciao.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.
Thank you.